Minji stood at the observation window of the refuge station, watching the distant flashes of weapons fire light up the darkness of space. 3 years she had been here, running the only safe place for children caught in the war. 3 years of wiping tears, mending wounds, and teaching small alien beings that not everyone in the galaxy wanted to hurt them. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of the cubs playing in the common area. Kix was growling playfully, his feline voice mixing with the musical chimes of Thrip and Thrappa. Somewhere in the mix was Nulo's soft humming, the sound she made when she felt safe enough to glow. The communication panel beeped. Minji's heart jumped. She recognized that specific tone. It was the emergency frequency, the one her brother used. "Minji, are you there?" Daeho's voice crackled through the speakers. He sounded tired and worried. "I'm here," she said, moving quickly to the panel. "What's wrong?" "Everything." Daeho let out a long breath. The diplomatic convoy carrying the peace treaty documents was ambushed in the Kelvin belt. Everyone is dead. The data core with the treaty is still out there somewhere in the wreckage. Minji felt her stomach drop. She knew what those documents meant. The 3 major powers fighting this war had finally agreed on peace terms. The Morel Empire, the Chiton Collective, and the Aferi Communion had been killing each other for 5 years. Millions were dead. These treaty documents could end it all. "Can't the fleet send someone to retrieve it?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "The Kelvin belt is having one of its magnetic storms. Our sensors can barely see through the interference. We'd need someone who knows how to navigate those storms manually, someone who's done it before." Daeho paused. "You're the only person in range who can do this, sister." Minji closed her eyes. Years ago, before she started the refuge, she had surveyed the Kelvin belt. She had learned its patterns, its dangers, its strange magnetic flows. She could navigate it blind if she had to. "How long do I have?" she asked quietly. "The storm will get worse in about 6 hours. After that, nothing gets in or out for days." "And Minji, all 3 factions have warships heading to the belt. If they get there first and destroy those documents, the war continues. Maybe for years more." Minji looked back toward the common area. Through the doorway, she could see Kix's tail swishing as he played. The twins were climbing on the furniture, their chitinous bodies clicking softly. Nulo was changing colors, bright blues and greens flowing across her crystalline skin. "I need 2 hours to prep my shuttle," Minji said. "Thank you," Daeho said, relief clear in his voice. "Be careful out there." The connection ended. Minji stood alone in the observation room, her hands shaking slightly. She had promised herself she would never leave these children. They had all been abandoned once. Some had watched their parents die. Others had simply been left behind when evacuations happened too quickly. She walked to the common area. All 4 cubs looked up when she entered. Kix's large eyes focused on her immediately. His ears, usually relaxed and happy, twitched forward in concern. "Something's wrong," Kix said. At 6 years old, he was the eldest. He had learned to read the emotions of the adults around him. "You're scared." Minji sat down on the floor, and immediately all 4 cubs moved closer. Thrip and Thrappa pressed against her sides, their harmonics shifting to questioning tones. Nulo climbed into her lap, turning a soft gray color. "I have to go away for a little while," Minji said, keeping her voice steady. "There's something very important I need to do, something that could help end the war." "No." Kix's voice was flat. "You can't leave. You promised you would stay." "I'm not leaving like your parents left," Minji said gently. "I'm coming back. I promise." "They all say that," Thrip chimed, their voice joining with Thrappa's to create an eerie harmony. "The ones who left our hive said they would come back." Nulo didn't speak. She just turned darker gray, almost black, and pressed her face against Minji's chest. Minji felt tears burning in her eyes, but she forced them back. "Listen to me. All of you, look at me." She waited until all 4 cubs were watching her face. "I have never broken a promise to you, not once. When I say I will read you stories, I do. When I say I will play with you, I do. When I say your nightmares will get better, they do, right?" Slowly, the cubs nodded. "I will be back before star reading time tonight," Minji said firmly. "We will sit in the observatory like we always do, and we will look at the stars together. I promise you this. What if you don't come back?" Kix asked quietly. "What if something bad happens?" "Then I will find a way to come back anyway," Minji said. "Because you are my cubs and I don't leave my cubs behind, never." She spent the next hour preparing her shuttle while Heejin, her second in command, watched the cubs. Hyojin was a good person, another human who understood that some things were more important than politics or war. But Minji could see the worry in her friend's eyes. "You don't have to do this," Hyojin said as Minji loaded supplies into the songbird. "Yes, I do," Minji replied. "If I can stop this war even one day sooner, that's one more day children don't become orphans." "What if you don't make it back?" "I will. I will make it back," Minji repeated, her voice hard. "Those cubs have lost enough. They're not losing me, too." When it was time to leave, all 4 cubs insisted on walking her to the airlock. They formed a small parade behind her, silent and solemn. At the door, Minji knelt down one more time. She groomed Kix's ears the way Morel mothers did, running her fingers through the soft fur. She hummed the harmonic pattern that comforted Thrip and Thrappa, the one that meant family stays together. She touched Nulo's crystalline face gently, sending warmth through the contact. "Remember," she said, "star reading time. I'll be back." Kix suddenly sat up very straight. "When you come back, we're going to tackle you." "What?" Minji laughed despite herself. "To make sure you're real," Kix explained seriously, "we'll wait right here by the door. When you come back, we'll know you kept your promise because we'll tackle you. That's how we'll know you're really here and not just a dream." "Okay," Minji said, smiling through her tears. "You can tackle me. I'll be ready." She stepped into the airlock. As the door began to close, she saw all 4 cubs sit down in a row watching her. Kix in front, the twins on either side, Nulo in the back. Their eyes never left her face, the door sealed shut. Minji walked to her shuttle, forcing herself not to look back. She had a job to do. She had to retrieve those documents. She had to help end this war. And she had to come back before star reading time. The songbird launched from the station, its engines burning bright against the darkness. Inside, Minji set her course for the Kelvin belt. The magnetic storm was already visible on her sensors, a swirling mass of energy and interference. Behind her on the station, 4 small figures sat by the airlock door and waited. They would wait as long as it took. The Kelvin belt looked like a nightmare painted in light and shadow. Asteroids tumbled through space in chaotic patterns, each one crackling with blue-white energy from the magnetic storm. Minji had seen it before, years ago when she was mapping survey routes. Back then she had been fearless. Back then she had nothing to lose. Now she had 4 small reasons to be afraid. The songbird's sensors flickered and died as she entered the belt. She had expected this. The magnetic interference made electronic navigation impossible. She switched to manual controls, her hands steady on the flight stick despite her racing heart. "Come on, old girl," she murmured to her shuttle. "We've done this before." She flew by instinct and memory, dodging asteroids that appeared suddenly out of the electromagnetic haze. Lightning arced between the rocks, creating a deadly web of energy. One wrong move and the songbird would be fried. The debris field from the diplomatic convoy appeared on her short-range scanners. Twisted metal, shattered hull plates, and the frozen bodies of the crew floated in the void. Minji felt sick looking at them. These people had been trying to bring peace and someone had killed them for it. She maneuvered the songbird carefully through the wreckage, scanning for the data core. It would be in a reinforced container, designed to survive impacts and explosions. It took her 20 minutes of searching before she found it, wedged between 2 pieces of hull plating. Minji suited up and went outside for the retrieval. The magnetic storm made her suit systems glitch, but she managed to secure the data core and bring it back to the shuttle. She held it in her hands for a moment, this small device that could end a war and save millions of lives. "Got you," she whispered. That was when her long-range sensors started screaming warnings. 3 warships had entered the Kelvin belt. 1 Morel cruiser, 1 Chiton destroyer, and 1 a ferry battleship. They were converging on her position. Minji's blood ran cold. She activated her communications, trying to hail all 3 ships at once. "This is Minji of the refuge station. I have retrieved the treaty documents. I repeat, I have the treaty. Ceasefire and allow me to—" Static swallowed her words. The magnetic interference was too strong. She tried again, boosting her signal, but it was no use. She could see the warships maneuvering, their weapons charging. They couldn't hear her clearly. They probably thought she was working for one of the other sides, or worse, they might be here to destroy the treaty themselves. Minji ran back to the cockpit and fired up the Songbird's engines. She wasn't a combat pilot. She couldn't outrun military vessels. But she knew this asteroid belt better than anyone alive, and she had one advantage they didn't have. She knew what was about to happen. Years ago, studying these asteroids, she had documented a pattern. The magnetic storms built up in cycles, and when they reached a peak, they discharged in massive bursts of energy. The sensors showed that peak approaching fast. Maybe 15 minutes away, the warships were moving to intercept her. Weapons fire began to light up the space around her. Minji threw the songbird into a dive between two massive asteroids, feeling the shuttle groan under the stress. "I'm trying to help you idiots," she shouted at the pursuing ships, even though they couldn't hear her. More weapons fire. The Morel cruiser was the closest, its plasma cannons tracking her movements. The Titan destroyer was coming from above, launching missiles that exploded against the asteroids in bursts of shrapnel. The Aferi battleship hung back, its massive energy weapons charging. They were going to kill each other, and they were going to kill her too. The magnetic storm suddenly intensified. Minji felt it through the Songbird's hull, a thrumming vibration that made her teeth ache. This was it. The big discharge was coming. She dove deeper into the densest part of the asteroid field, where the rocks were so thick that the warships couldn't follow without risking collision. She found a crater in one of the larger asteroids and tucked the Songbird inside, powering down every system she could spare. "Come on," she whispered, watching her sensors. "Just a little more." The storm hit like the hand of an angry god. Lightning erupted between every asteroid in the belt. Massive arcs of energy, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a city. The entire asteroid field lit up brighter than a sun, beautiful and absolutely deadly. Minji watched through the Songbird's reinforced viewport as the three warships were caught in the discharge. Their shields flared and failed. Their weapons went dark. They broke off their attack and began retreating, trailing smoke and sparks. She had survived. She was safe in her little crater, protected by the asteroid's mass. That was when her own shuttle got hit. A stray bolt of lightning found the Songbird despite her hiding spot. The shuttle's systems exploded in a shower of sparks. Minji was thrown against her restraints, her head cracking against the headrest. Warning alarms screamed. The lights went out, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency systems. Minji's training kicked in. She checked the damage. Main power was gone. Communications were completely dead. Life support was running on backup batteries, and those batteries would last about 2 hours. She tried to restart the main systems, but nothing responded. The lightning had fried the primary power core. She could fix it maybe if she had time and the right tools, but she didn't have either. 2 hours of oxygen. That was all she had left. Minji looked at the data core sitting on the co-pilot's seat. She had succeeded. She had the treaty. But if she couldn't get a distress signal out, no one would ever know. She would die out here in this asteroid crater and the war would continue. She thought about the cubs waiting by the airlock door, Kik sitting tall and brave, Thrip and Thrapa humming their worried harmonics, Nulo turning gray with fear. She had promised them. Star reading time. She had promised. Minji forced herself to breathe slowly to conserve oxygen. She pulled out her repair kit and started working on the communication system. It was badly damaged, but maybe, just maybe, she could get a weak signal out. Her hands shook as she worked, not from fear but from anger. Angry at herself for taking this risk. Angry at the stupid warships for attacking when she was trying to help. Angry at the universe for putting her in this situation. But mostly, she was angry because she might have to break her promise to 4 small children, who had already lost everything once. "Not happening," she muttered, stripping wires and reconnecting circuits. "I'm getting home. I promised them." Back on the refuge station, the cubs hadn't moved from their spot by the airlock door. Hyejin had tried to coax them to lunch, but they refused. They sat in their formation, watching the door with unblinking focus. Other station workers walked past, giving the small group sad looks. Everyone knew about Minji's mission. Everyone knew how dangerous the Kelvin belt was, especially during a storm. "She'll come back," Kik said suddenly, though no one had spoken. His tail was wrapped tightly around his body. She promised. Thrip and Thrapa's harmonics had become discordant, a jangling sound that hurt to hear. Nulo had turned completely gray, sitting as still as a statue. "It's been 5 hours," Hyejin said gently. "Maybe you should rest. I'll watch the door for you." "No," all 4 cubs said together. So they waited, and in the Kelvin belt, Minji worked frantically against her dwindling oxygen supply, trying to fix a communication system that might be beyond repair. She had 1 hour of air left when she finally got a weak signal to activate. It was barely functional, but it was something. She sent out a distress call, her hands shaking. "This is Minji. I have the treaty. I need rescue. Kelvin Belt, Sector 7. Please respond," Static answered her. The storm was still too strong for clear communication, but maybe, just maybe, someone would hear. Minji's oxygen counter read 45 minutes. She stared at it, watching the numbers slowly tick down. 44 minutes, 43. She had stopped working on the communication system. There was nothing more she could do. The weak distress signal was broadcasting, sending her coordinates into the magnetic storm. Either someone would pick it up or they wouldn't. The songbird was cold now. With main power gone, the heaters had shut down. Minji could see her breath forming small clouds in the air. She pulled her jacket tighter and tried not to think about how empty space was just outside the hull. Instead, she thought about the cubs. She remembered the day Kix had arrived at the station. He'd been tiny then, barely 4 years old. His planet had been bombed during a surprise attack. His parents had pushed him into an escape pod at the last moment. Minji had found him crying in the corner of the refugee processing center, too scared to make a sound. It had taken 3 weeks before he spoke to anyone. Now he was brave and protective, always looking after the younger cubs. He had learned to trust again because Minji had showed up every single day, exactly when she said she would. 30 minutes of oxygen left. Thrip and Thrapa had been found floating in space, the only survivors of their hive ship. The chitin lived in massive family groups, hundreds of individuals connected through harmonic communication. When the ship exploded, Thrip and Thrapa lost every single family member in one moment. They had been silent for months, their harmonics flat and dead. Minji had sung to them every day nonsense songs in her human voice. Slowly, the twins had started to hum along. Now their harmonics were bright and alive again, full of curiosity and joy. 20 minutes. Nulo's story was different. Her parents hadn't died. They had simply left her behind during a chaotic evacuation. Crystalline beings like the Ephery moved slowly, and Nulo had been small and scared. Her parents had run ahead, planning to come back for her. They never did. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they got swept up in the crowd. Maybe they thought someone else would take care of her. Nulo had spent months convinced she was unlovable, that something about her made her parents leave. She would turn dark colors and try to make herself invisible. Minji had spent countless hours showing her that she was wanted, that she mattered, that her colors were beautiful. 10 minutes of oxygen. Minji pulled out her personal recorder. The communications might be dead, but she could still save messages locally. If someone found her body, at least the cubs would know she tried. She recorded 4 messages, 1 for each cub. She kept her voice steady even though tears ran down her cheeks. "Kix, you are so brave. Braver than me. I need you to help the others after I'm gone. Take care of them the way you've always done. You're going to be an amazing adult, and I'm so proud of you. Thrip and Thrapa, keep singing. Your harmonics are the most beautiful sound in the galaxy. Don't let them go silent again. Find joy in the world. Find music in everything. That's what makes you special. Nulo, my sweet girl. You are not invisible. You are not forgettable. You shine brighter than any star. Your parents leaving was not your fault. It was never your fault. You are loved. You are wanted. Remember that." She paused, then added one more message for all of them together. "I'm sorry I broke my promise. I tried so hard to keep it. But I need you to know that every day with you was the best day of my life. You saved me as much as I saved you. You taught me that family isn't about blood or species. It's about showing up. It's about keeping promises. I love you all. Never forget that. 5 minutes of oxygen." Minji closed her eyes. She had a choice to make. She could let the oxygen run out and drift off peacefully, or she could activate the emergency stasis pod. Stasis might preserve her brain function long enough for rescue, but it could also fail catastrophically. The pod wasn't meant to work without main power. She looked at the data core again. The treaty. Peace for millions. She looked at her recorder. The messages for her cubs, damn it, she whispered. She couldn't give up. Not while there was even the smallest chance. She climbed into the stasis pod and activated the emergency protocols. The pod hummed to life on backup power, and Minji felt the cold liquid begin to fill the chamber. It was supposed to be a gradual process, but with damaged systems, it flooded in too fast. She gasped, fighting panic as the liquid covered her face. Then everything went dark. Back on the refuge station, 14 hours had passed. The cubs still sat by the airlock door. They hadn't eaten. They had barely moved. Station personnel whispered worries as they walked past. Someone should make them leave, one worker said quietly. You try, Hyejin replied, exhausted. She had been standing nearby the entire time, unable to convince the cubs to move. They're not going anywhere. Kix's ears were flat against his head now. His brave face had cracked hours ago, and dried tear tracks stained his fur, but he wouldn't leave. The twins had gone silent, their harmonics completely stopped. Nulo was the color of deep space, so dark she was almost black. A group of older children, other refugees on the station, came to sit with them. They formed a ring around the cubs, a silent support. They knew what it meant to lose someone. They knew what it meant to hope against hope. Tell us about Minji, one of the older children said. Tell us good stories. Kix spoke first, his voice rough. She learned how to groom my fur the right way. It took her weeks because human hands aren't made for it. But she practiced every night until she got it perfect. That's how I knew she really cared. Thrip and Thrapa managed a soft harmonic. She sang to us. Human voices aren't like ours, but she tried. She sang until we remembered how to sing too. Nulo touched her crystalline hands together, making a soft chiming sound. She told me I was beautiful every day, even when I was too scared to believe it. She never stopped telling me. The stories continued. How Minji had stayed up all night when Kix had nightmares. How she had learned to cook food safe for 4 different alien species. How she had modified the entire station to make it comfortable for everyone. How she had fought bureaucrats and politicians to get supplies for the cubs. She'll come back, Kix said again, though his voice wavered. She promised. In the human defense fleet, Daeho was arguing with his commander. We have to send rescue ships, he insisted. She could still be alive. We can't risk pilots in that storm, the commander said. It's still too dangerous. The magnetic interference would kill them before they found her. She's my sister. I know, and I'm sorry. But I won't send people to die on a rescue that's almost certainly too late. Daeho wanted to scream. He wanted to steal a ship and go himself. But he knew the commander was right. The storm was still too strong. Rescue was impossible. Then the sensors picked up something. A weak signal, barely readable through the interference. It was Minji's distress beacon still broadcasting. She's alive, Daeho breathed. She got a signal out. The 3 warships that had retreated from the belt picked up the signal too. They were damaged but functional, limping back toward their bases for repairs. When they heard the signal, they stopped. On the Morel cruiser, Captain June examined the data. The human had the treaty. She had been trying to save it, not destroy it. And they had attacked her. On the Chiton destroyer, the Hive commander felt shame through the neural network. They had misunderstood. The human was not an enemy. On the Afiri battleship, the illuminated leader saw the truth clearly now. This human had risked everything for peace. The 3 ships opened communication channels with each other for the first time in years. They spoke carefully, formally, but with growing understanding. They had all been trying to destroy what they thought was a threat. None of them had realized the human was trying to help. We must rescue her, Captain June said. Agreed, the Hive commander harmonized. It is the right path, the illuminated leader confirmed. They began coordinating, sharing sensor data to map the safest route through the weakening storm. It would still be hours before rescue was possible, but now all 3 former enemies worked together toward a common goal. Daeho watched from his ship, amazed. They're cooperating. Because of your sister, his commander said quietly. She's giving them a reason to trust each other. On the refuge station, Hyejin's communicator buzzed. She stepped away from the cubs to take the call. When she came back, her eyes were wet with tears. They picked up her signal, she told the cubs. They're going to try to rescue her. Kix stood up slowly. Then she kept her promise. She's coming back. The cubs rearranged themselves by the door, taking up their pounce formation again. They would wait as long as it took. In the frozen darkness of the Songbird, Minji floated in stasis, unaware that 3 warships were racing to save her, unaware that her cubs still waited at the door. Daeho sat in the pilot's seat of a fast rescue pod, running through pre-flight checks with shaking hands. Around him, the launch bay of the fleet carrier was busy with activity. Mechanics were stripping the pod down to minimum weight, removing everything that wasn't essential. Every extra gram meant slower speed, and speed was everything now. "You don't have to do this," Commander Taewon said, standing beside the pod. "We can wait for the storm to weaken more. Maybe another 6 hours." "Minji doesn't have 6 hours," Deho replied. "The stasis pod on her shuttle runs on backup power. It's been almost 20 hours since she went missing. If the pod failed, she's already dead. If it's still working, it won't last much longer." "The odds?" "I don't care about odds," Deho interrupted. He looked at his commander. "She's my sister. Humans don't calculate odds when it comes to family. We just go." Taewon was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "The 3 warships are creating a sensor relay chain through the storm. They'll guide you to her position. Strange how they're working together now." "She has that effect on people," Deho said softly. He thought about the last time he had seen Minji before she left the diplomatic corps. She had been broken then, haunted by the children she couldn't save. Now she ran a refugee station, caring for alien cubs that most humans couldn't even tell apart. He had never understood it. Why waste your life on alien children? Why care so much about beings that weren't even human? But watching these 3 warships cooperate, former enemies working together to save his sister, he was starting to understand. Minji didn't see aliens or humans. She just saw people who needed help. "Launch when ready," Taewon said, stepping back. Deho sealed the pod and initiated launch sequence. The bay doors opened ahead of him, revealing the star-filled darkness of space. Beyond, the Kelvin belt glowed with residual energy from the storm. "This is Rescue Pod 1, he transmitted. "Launching now." The pod shot out of the carrier like a bullet, its engines burning at maximum thrust. Deho felt the acceleration press him back into his seat. The pod shook and rattled, never designed for this kind of speed. Within minutes, he entered the edge of the magnetic storm. His instruments immediately started glitching. Navigation went haywire. His radio filled with static, then the relay kicked in. The 3 warships, positioned at careful intervals, began transmitting coordinated sensor data. The Morel cruiser tracked his pod's position. The Chiton destroyer mapped the asteroid movements. The Afiri battleship calculated safe flight paths. Data appeared on Deho's screen, showing him exactly where to fly. He followed it blindly, trusting these former enemies with his life. His pod wove between asteroids, diving and climbing through the deadly field. Lightning still arced through space, but the relay helped him avoid the worst of it. "Rescue Pod 1, this is Captain June of the Morel cruiser." A voice crackled through his radio. "You are approaching the target location." "Reduce speed," Deho throttled back and his pod slowed. Through the view screen, he could see a large asteroid with a crater in its surface, and tucked inside that crater, almost invisible against the rock, was the songbird. "I see her," Deho transmitted. Moving in for docking, he brought the pod alongside Minji's shuttle carefully. The songbird looked dead, no lights, no power signatures. His heart sank. He had come all this way, but was he too late? The pod's magnetic clamps grabbed onto the songbird's hull. Deho suited up and moved through the airlock, entering his sister's shuttle. Inside was dark and freezing. Frost covered every surface. "Minji," he called out, though his radio was useless in here. He found her in the stasis pod. The pod was still functioning, but barely. Its power indicators were flashing red. Maybe another hour of power left, if that. Deho's hands moved fast, connecting emergency power from his suit to the pod. He couldn't move Minji while she was in stasis. He had to stabilize the pod first, then carefully transfer her to his rescue pod. It took 30 precious minutes. His suit's air supply was dropping. The storm outside was intensifying again, another surge building. But he refused to rush and risk harming his sister. Finally, he had Minji secured in the rescue pod's medical bay. The pod systems immediately began warming her, bringing her out of stasis slowly and safely. He grabbed the data core from the Songbird's cockpit, then sealed up and detached. "This is Rescue Pod 1, he transmitted. "I have her. We're coming out." The relay guided him back through the storm. It was worse now, the magnetic surges stronger. His pod's shields flickered and sparked. Alarms wailed. But the 3 warships held their positions, maintaining the relay even as the storm battered their damaged vessels. Deho flew like he had never flown before, pushing the pod to its absolute limits. He could hear the engines screaming. Something in the aft section exploded, but he didn't care. They were so close now the pod burst out of the Kelvin belt, leaving the storm behind. Ahead, he could see the fleet carrier waiting. And beyond it, distant but visible, was the refuge station. Medical teams are standing by. Taewon's voice came through clearly now. Good work, Lieutenant. Is she alive? Daeho asked, not daring to look away from his flying. There was a pause while the medical sensors checked Minji's condition. Daeho held his breath. She's alive, the medical officer reported. Vitals are weak but stable. She should make a full recovery. Daeho let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His hands were shaking on the controls. Copy that. Requesting permission to dock at the refuge station instead of the carrier. Negative, Taewon said. She needs immediate medical attention. Commander, she made a promise to some children. They've been waiting by the door for over 20 hours. If I bring her back to the fleet, they'll think she's dead. They need to see her. There was a long silence. Then Taewon spoke again. Permission granted. Dock at the refuge station. Medical teams will meet you there. The pod limped toward the station, trailing smoke from its damaged engine. Daeho sent a message ahead. Tell the Cubs she's coming home. On the refuge station, Hyejin received the message and ran to the airlock. The Cubs were exactly where she had left them, still waiting in their formation. They looked exhausted and scared, but they hadn't moved. She's coming, Hyejin said, her voice breaking. Minji is coming back, the Cubs stirred. Kik stood up, his ears perking forward. Thrip and Thrapa's harmonics suddenly rang out, bright and clear. Nulo began to glow, shifting from dark gray to pale yellow. When? Kix demanded. When will she be here? Soon, very soon. Her shuttle is approaching now. The Cubs rearranged themselves, taking up their pounce formation. Kix in front, ready to leap. The twins on the sides, prepared to swarm. Nulo in the back, her crystalline body beginning to shine brighter with anticipation. Medical teams arrived, setting up equipment. Station personnel gathered, wanting to witness the reunion. Everyone knew the story now. The human who had risked everything to stop a war. The Cubs who had waited by the door because they believed in her promise. The airlock indicators lit up. A shuttle was docking. Inside the rescue pod, Minji was slowly waking up. Her eyes fluttered open. She was confused, disoriented. Where was she? You're safe, Daeho said, standing over her. We're at the refuge station. Your Cubs are waiting. Minji tried to sit up. Her body felt like ice. The Cubs? What time is it? Way past star reading time, Daeho admitted. But they're still waiting. Minji forced herself to stand despite Daeho's protests. She was dizzy and weak, but she could walk. She had to walk. She had made a promise. The treaty? She asked. Daeho held up the data core. Safe and sound. The 3 warships that attacked you are now working together. You started something, sister. Something good. Minji smiled faintly. That's nice. But right now I have 4 Cubs who need to tackle me. She walked to the airlock door, Daeho supporting her. Medical teams tried to stop her, but she waved them off. Behind the door she could hear the Cubs. Kix's growling. The twins' harmonics. Nulo's chiming. Open it, Minji said. The airlock door began to cycle open. The airlock door finished its cycle with a soft hiss. For one frozen moment, nobody moved. Minji stood in the doorway, exhausted and bruised, her clothes torn and her face pale from oxygen deprivation. But she was grinning. Actually grinning despite everything she had been through. The Cubs stared at her, as if unable to believe their eyes. Then Kix let out a yowl and launched himself forward. He hit Minji right in the midsection, his small body slamming into her with the full force of a morel pounce. Minji went down, laughing as she fell, her arms wrapping around the Cub automatically. Thrip and Thrapa were right behind him. They swarmed up her legs, their chitinous bodies clicking excitedly as they climbed. Their harmonics were so loud and joyful that everyone in the corridor had to cover their ears. Nulo came last, glowing bright gold like a tiny sun. She wrapped her crystalline arms around Minji's neck and held on tight, chiming so loudly that the sound echoed off the metal walls. They all went down in a heap on the floor. Minji lay there with 4 alien Cubs piled on top of her, and she was crying and laughing at the same time. Her body hurt from the tackle, but she had never felt happier. You came back, Kix said, his voice muffled against her chest. You really came back, I promised, Minji said, stroking his fur. I always keep my promises. You're late for star reading time, Thrip chimed. Very late, Thrapa added, their harmonics finally sinking into something resembling music again. I know, Minji said. I'm sorry. It took longer than I expected. Nulo pulled back to look at Minji's face. The little effery was glowing so brightly now that it was almost hard to look at her. We waited. We waited right here the whole time. I know you did, Minji whispered. You were so brave. The medical teams tried to approach, but Hijin held them back. Give them a minute, she said quietly, wiping her own tears. Daeho watched from the doorway of the airlock, leaning against the frame. He had never seen anything like this. 4 completely different species, all clinging to his sister like she was the center of their universe. And maybe she was. Maybe that was the point. Finally, after several minutes, Minji managed to sit up with cubs still draped all over her. Kik stayed pressed against her side, refusing to let go. The twins had settled in her lap. Nulo was perched on her shoulders. Okay, Minji said, looking around at the gathered crowd. I know medical wants to check me over. But first, we have some missed star reading time to make up for. Minji, you need treatment, a medical officer protested. It can wait an hour, Minji said firmly. My cubs need this more than I need medicine. Nobody argued with her. They all helped Minji to her feet, cubs still clinging to her, and made their way slowly to the station's observatory. Other children joined them along the way, creating a small parade through the corridors. The observatory was a clear dome at the top of the station, giving a perfect view of the stars. Minji settled down on the cushioned floor with her cubs arranged around her, exactly like always. Kix on her left, the twins on her right, Nulo in her lap. Other children sat in a circle around them, quiet and respectful. This was a sacred time, and they all knew it. Look up, Minji said softly, pointing at the stars through the dome. 4 small faces turned upward. That one there, Minji said, indicating a bright red star. That's your home, Kix, the Morel Empire. Kix's ears twitched. Do you think the war will end now, because of what you did? I hope so, Minji said. The treaty documents are safe. The 3 governments are talking to each other again. It's a start. If the war ends, will you take me home? Kix asked quietly. Minji looked down at him. Do you want to go home? Kix was silent for a long moment. Maybe someday, to visit. But this is home too now. You're here. Minji felt her throat tighten. You can always come back here, she promised. No matter what. This will always be home. She pointed to another part of the sky. And there, that cluster of blue stars. That's where the Chitin Collective is. Your hive, Thrip and Thrappa. The twins harmonized together, a sound of longing and sadness. They didn't need to say anything. Minji understood. Their entire hive was gone. There was no going back for them. But they had each other, and they had this new family. And that bright yellow star, Minji continued. That's the Etheri Communion's core world, Nulo. Nulo dimmed slightly. My parents are there. Maybe, Minji said gently. Or maybe they're somewhere else now. But wherever they are, I bet they think about you. I bet they wonder if you're okay. Do you really think so? I know so, Minji said. Because no one could forget you, Nulo. You're unforgettable. Nulo brightened again, glowing soft pink now, the color of contentment. They sat in silence for a while, just looking at the stars. Then Kik spoke up. Tell us about Earth, he said. About your home, Minji smiled. Earth is beautiful. Blue oceans and green land. When I was little, I used to lie in the grass and watch clouds drift by. My brother Daeho would make up stories about the cloud shapes. I was terrible at it, Daeho's voice came from behind them. He had followed quietly, standing at the edge of the observatory. You were always better at stories. Come sit, Minji invited. Daeho came forward awkwardly and sat down. The cubs eyed him with curiosity. They had never met him before, only heard Minji talk about her brother. This is Daeho, Minji said. He's the one who rescued me. He flew through that terrible storm to bring me home. Kik studied Daeho seriously. You saved her? I did, Daeho said. Then your family too, Kix declared. The twins harmonized their agreement. Nulo reached out and touched Daeho's hand, making her soft chiming sound. Daeho looked surprised, then moved. Thank you, he said quietly. They stayed in the observatory for an hour, telling stories and looking at stars. Medical teams waited patiently outside. Eventually, Minji's exhaustion caught up with her. She was falling asleep sitting up, cubs still piled around her. Okay, Hyejin said gently. Now medical gets their turn. The cubs didn't want to let go, but Minji promised them she would be right down the hall. They could visit her in the medical bay anytime they wanted. As the medical team helped Minji to her feet, Captain June's voice came through the station's communication system. Refuge Station, this is Captain June of the Morel cruiser. We wanted to let you know that all three governments have received the treaty documents. Preliminary talks are already beginning. They're calling it the Refuge Accords after your station. Minji smiled tiredly. Tell them that's nice. But the real heroes are four cubs who knew how to wait and believe in promises. Over the next few days, as Minji recovered in medical, something remarkable happened. The three warships that had attacked her requested permission to dock at the refuge station. Their captains wanted to meet her in person. They came to the medical bay one at a time. Captain June of the Morel was first, a tall being covered in silver fur. He stood at the foot of Minji's bed, his tail tucked in shame. I attacked you, he said. I almost killed you. I wanted to apologize. You didn't know, Minji said simply. The storm made communication impossible. Still, I should have tried harder to understand. Instead, I assumed the worst. He looked at Kix, who was sitting on Minji's bed, protective as always. Young one, you are Morel? Kix nodded warily. If the peace holds, you will be able to return home someday, Captain June said. Your people will welcome you. This is my home, Kix said, pressing closer to Minji. Captain June bowed his head. I understand. The human has made a better home than we did. The chitin hive commander came next, their insectoid body clicking softly as they moved. They harmonized a greeting to Thrip and Thrappa, who responded shyly. Your hive is gone, the commander said to the twins. But you have found a new hive here. That is good. That is as it should be. The illuminated leader of the Aphiri visited last, their crystalline body refracting light into rainbows. They looked at Nulo with something like sadness. Little one, they said, I will search our records. Perhaps I can find your parents. Nulo turned gray, scared. What if they don't want me? Then they are fools, the leader said simply. And you will stay here with your human, who clearly has more wisdom than many of my people. After they left, Minji lay back in her bed with cubs piled around her again. Medical had given up trying to keep them out. The cubs slept better near Minji anyway, and she healed faster with them close. Minji? Kix said quietly. Yes? Are you going to leave again? To do more important missions? Minji was quiet for a moment. Then she shook her head. No, this is my mission. Right here. You four are more important than any treaty or government. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Nulo asked. I promise, Minji said. I'm staying right here with my cubs forever. Deho, who had been sitting in the corner, smiled. He finally understood what his sister had been trying to tell him all along. Saving the galaxy didn't always mean fighting wars or negotiating treaties. Sometimes it meant showing up every day for four small beings who needed someone to keep their promises. Sometimes the biggest battles were fought at home, by the door where the cubs waited. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was simply come back grinning, ready to be tackled, ready to prove that love was stronger than war, that promises mattered more than politics, and that family could be built across any distance, any difference, any impossible odd. The cubs fell asleep curled around Minji. Through the medical bay window, the stars shone bright.